Welcome back to another episode of Ubuntu Podcast. This week is News Week, and we're joined by friend of the show, Stuart Langridge. Hello, Stuart.
Hello.
Hello there. And also joining me for episode 5 are Alan.
Hello.
Hello. And Mark.
Hello.
How are we all?
None too shabby.
Ticking along, you know how it is.
What have you been up to, Martin?
Well, I have been taking a lot of selfies.
I'll get you, hipster.
And sending them to a random bloke on the internet.
Oh. Did he know he was going to get these?
He asked for them.
Really?
Yes.
Have you alerted CEOP?
So you might remember at the end of last year, you and I, Alan and I, went to UbuCon, and whilst we were there, Sujiveen managed to get a photograph of me all togged up in like every Ubuntu thing imaginable, with my thumbs up, and we post it in our Telegram group. That's ubuntupodcast.org/Telegram for Joe Ressington, who I know is listening. Paul Gleason took that image and many others and made a sticker pack, a Telegram sticker pack for System AU, and included some images of us. And I have done, if you look in our Telegram group, I have taken like 40 odd selfies and he's turned them into a sticker pack. So if you're in our Telegram group, you can now get hold of this Telegram group of me reenacting many emoji.
So basically, you have pretended to be various emoji faces, like man hailing a bus, man dancing.
I didn't do man dancing, actually, no.
Oh, slacker. So, and he turns these into stickers.
He has, yes.
What is the purpose of this?
Frivolity and folly, I think, is really the point of it. You're featured as well, you'll be pleased to know.
Yeah, well, there's a new sticker that I noticed turned up today of me wearing a ridiculous outfit. So, yeah, that's great. Thanks, Paul.
Just to confirm, the fact that I'm in your Telegram group doesn't mean that it's compulsory that I have these stickers, right?
It's compulsory that you see them, however.
Yeah, when other people post them. Yeah, unless there's some way of blocking sticker packs.
And if you're looking at them now, there is now a selection of images flowing through our Telegram group.
I suppose I could always put my own eyes out or something to avoid it.
You could, yes. I was chatting with Ike earlier, and he threatened to do a striptease on one of the live recordings of their podcast, and I threatened to spoon my own eyes out.
Moving on, Stuart, what have you been up to?
What have I been up to? The thing I was playing with this weekend actually was testing Microsoft Edge, the web browser.
Oh,
because they used to do this thing called remote.ie, which basically ran a VNC connection on an Azure server that they did, and then gave you Internet Explorer, so you could test it from an Ubuntu desktop. Dead handy, and then they shut it down. Oh. But they've now paired with BrowserStack, who do the same kind of live thing. And BrowserStack's business model is you pay them money and then you can test things in various different browsers. But if you're testing Microsoft Edge, it's completely free. Which is super handy. So you just sign up to, I mean, this sounds like an advert for BrowserStack, which it isn't, but it's just the most handy thing I've come, and it works perfectly because it just runs in a web browser, works perfectly for my Ubuntu desktop, no problem at all. So if you want to test Edge, just works. Mark,
do you think it's free because Microsoft is subsidizing that?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure that's exactly why it is. BrowserStack said, well, we'll offer it for free, certainly. We'll just charge it up and then you pay for all of it. And the Microsoft people went, yeah, we'll just charge it to the Edge marketing budget, no problem.
These BrowserStack, there's BrowserStack, there's another called Browser Shots. I had a jolly wheeze last week with these and started pointing them at distro watch pages for random distros, so that you end up with like hundreds of different browsers all pointing to the distro watch pages. Wondering if this might, affect their stats in some way, just for the lols.
That's rather naughty. Browser Shots and Browser Stack are a bit different. Browser Shots goes and just takes a screenshot of whichever URL you point at.
That's what I was thinking of.
So it's ideal to, for example, bomb a particular website, Browser Stack actually runs a real browser and gives you access to it.
That's better.
Either programmatically, so you can use it to run tests or whatever,
Ooh,
or the new thing.
nice.
So Selenium, for those of you web developers, if you use Selenium, you can point Selenium at the Browser Stack server and say test in the following browsers, and it will return you the results. Or the new thing they do is Browser Stack Live, which is basically it runs the browser and then gives you a connection to it, which runs so it basically runs VNC or an approximation to it inside your browser, pointing at Microsoft Edge or whichever browser you pick. And Edge is free, so it's dead handy.
Yeah, super. Thanks for that.
Two big thumbs up for that one, in my opinion.
Yes.
Right, shall we move on to the news headlines?
Let's.
And now it is indeed time for the news.
So
First up,
following
Martin.
following on from what Stuart was saying, we've got another Microsoft article here. It says that Microsoft are shutting down CodePlex, which was their code hosting platform, I think specifically for, I'm not going to say open source, but public projects. Does that sound about right? I'm not sure quite what the licensing requirements were.
Most of them were open source licenses, but I don't think all of them were.
Right.
And there were a couple of things which were under when Microsoft were busy flirting with the idea of coming up with their own open source licenses for things, the MSPL or what have you, some of which were open and some of which were shared source or what have you. CodePlex handled a bunch of those.
Yes.
Right.
And this is separate from what was called the CodePlex Foundation, which is now the Outer Curve Foundation.
So I'd only
believe that still
heard of
exists.
CodePlex when I was investigating the Veracrypt project, which is the continuation of TrueCrypt, and that was or is hosted on CodePlex. That's the only project that I've ever had any means to go and find that was on there. But they're suggesting now that projects migrate to GitHub for their open source project hosting.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the main driver behind this is everyone uses GitHub now. It's the same reason that Google Code shut down is that everyone moved to GitHub.
Yeah. Are we not putting all our eggs in one big GitHub basket?
Oh, it's not like it ever goes down or anything.
Lol.
So
yes, we are doing precisely that.
and who's the risk mitigation for all of this code being in GitHub? I mean, each of us, I imagine all of us have got GitHub repositories.
Yep.
Yeah. And do you do anything to mirror your GitHub repository somewhere else?
I have it cloned on my local machine.
Yeah. Is that your backup strategy? I have it cloned.
GitHub's my backup strategy.
Yeah.
It would be nice to push these things to GitLab as well, to be honest, but I just haven't got around to it. Private stuff is on Bitbucket.
Yeah.
To be fair, I don't actually have anything that's sort of important enough for me to worry about. It's all just random hacky bits of code, which if the public version of it goes away, then I don't really mind so much. I can put it somewhere else when that happens.
Maybe the public do. That's a little bit
Oh,
of
yes, okay.
the Internet Archive that goes away.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a problem with things like, if there's some thing you're dependent upon as part of your project, you happen to build something, it could be small and hacky like a small JavaScript library, but somebody else may fully depend on that. And if that goes away, then, you break the builds of a whole bunch of open source projects and potentially proprietary projects as well, because you don't know what people are doing inside their organization that reaches out and grabs bits from, GitHub and wherever else. There could be stuff that we just can't see that people, are breaking.
How many Go and Node projects are importing from GitHub constantly. So, yeah, I have most of my repositories on Bitbucket. I prefer that as a platform. But if you want somewhere to mirror your GitHub to, and it's an open source project, you can mirror to Launchpad, of course. So you can actually have Launchpad take care of your backups for you, and that will sync several times a day. Or you can use something like Gitterlite to pull it to a machine of your own or a VPS or something. Oh, well. Anyway, CodePlex is going read-only in October, and it'll be shut down completely on the 17th of December. So if you or someone has a project on CodePlex, it's time for them to move it somewhere else, not necessarily just GitHub.
Go and dig them up and tell them. Moving on. An Australian banking group has been denied access to the iPhone's NFC chips for some alternate Apple Pay. There's a bunch of banks in Australia, and they've gone through a legal process with the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, and they found that the banks should be allowed to create their own mobile payment service and use the NFC chips in iPhones, so that all those people who have iPhones in Australia could use those with these particular banking providers. And interestingly, Apple's response is, no. Even if you say we should do that, we're not going to do that. So, yeah, that's great.
This is hilarious. I mean, the thing I liked about this myself was that the Competition Commission decided they weren't going to allow these banks to it because their quote was they consider that the application gives them incentives to favour their own wallets will limit the public benefits of increased competition between digital wallets, i.e. we don't trust you bank people to actually make good use of this rather than just lining your own pockets. But then Apple said, we couldn't care less if you command us to allow these people access to it. Even if you do, we're just going to say no anyway.
Brilliant. Oh, dear. Yes, moving on. Let's have some good news, Stuart.
Yes, so Google have published a new website, the Google open source website, which lists all the open source projects that Google are involved with or have created or published or whatever. And it's fascinating. It lists 2,000 projects, and the range of these things is amazing. There's, in the first 2 or 3, there's a visual puzzle solver for the airport puzzle from Smart Games, which is obviously just a very small thing. And then the next one is Android. You know.
So when you sort alphabetically, it really does mix things up a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you're looking at this list and they've got, build systems and little benchmark things, and there's Chromium, and it's nuts. It's great that they have it. It's, to be honest with you, the fact that this stuff comes from Google is not particularly of interest to me or anyone other than Google people, but it does kind of raise a flag to look how much stuff Google how much they actually do and how much they're involved with.
Yeah. The one that stood out to me is that they've got their fork of OpenSSL, which is boring SSL, which is kind of concerning because it means that's where they're focusing their eyes and their attention. So is that one of the larger SSL, users that aren't looking at the OpenSSL code anymore because they've got their own project?
Yeah, but that's what happens when you fork.
Is it like, it feels like this is just like a big list of stuff they've been doing. Yes, well done. Big round of applause. Nice website. But does anyone outside Google really care about this? I mean, it's interesting, and I don't know that you would scroll through this list and go, wow, they open source that, unless you weren't really in the realm of seeing these things that you would.
Well, there is also, alongside this, they've also published a lot of documentation about things like their release process, and how they contribute upstream and their licensing policies, which might be useful to other organizations who want to do more open source stuff and have a model for doing it, which they can follow or learn from.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they've published the list is basically self-aggrandizement, right? It's saying, look at all the stuff that we do, hooray. No one's going to say, oh, where do I get that project from? And go to opensource.google.com to find it.
Right.
But to be honest with you, if I'd contribute, if I was busy running 2,000 open source projects, I'd probably write it on my website as well. So,
yes, that's great news. Mark, tell us something horrible.
Well, you might remember that we spoke a while ago about the then Home Secretary Theresa May saying that that the security services in the UK should be able to basically break WhatsApp encryption if they thought they needed to read bad people's messages. Well, Theresa May is now our Prime Minister, and she's appointed a lady called Amber Rudd to be the new Home Secretary, and she's now been saying the same thing. So this is following the recent terror attack in Westminster, which happened just after we did our last recording, and the weekend after that, Amber Rudd was interviewed on the BBC, and she was challenged with whether or not she thought it was unacceptable that you could have end-to-end encryption with WhatsApp and no one could read your messages, because apparently the attacker had used WhatsApp on their phone. And she said, yes, of course, and we should be able to. We used to steam envelopes open and with a warrant, and that was okay. So we should be able to read WhatsApp if it's a bad person's WhatsApp. And then she went on to say things like they don't want to go into the cloud. They just want to read these bad people's messages, and they need the help of people who understand the necessary hashtags to stop terrorists getting access to information. So this doesn't fill me with confidence that she actually knows what she's talking about.
Didn't she correct that? And she didn't mean hashtags. She meant something else. Like
she didn't. Well, not. Or I was watching the interview on the show, and she didn't say it then. Maybe she followed it up.
Yes.
But this is basically the same sort of security theatre that we have seen before being wheeled out again, because obviously I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail on here because that's not what this show's about, but essentially, you know, having the guy's phone and being able to read what he was saying on WhatsApp doesn't stop him getting into a car and driving around London, which is what he was doing. Right. And also Tim Berners-Lee has gone through in not too much detail, but with a reasonable explanation of why this kind of thing isn't helpful.
Mm. I recently saw a picture of Tim Berners-Lee being interviewed on the TV, and the caption for his sort of title said web developer, which made me smile because, you know, web developer is probably a little bit wrong, but I think they should change that caption to the web developer.
Yes. Yeah. Developed the web. Yes, he did.
Next up, we have the news that Android has overtaken Windows in terms of internet usage for the first time. So by this measure, Android is now the world's most popular operating system.
Wow. That's not surprising given how cheap Android devices are and how some people can burn through multiple Android devices in the time that they own one Windows laptop or one Windows desktop.
Yes, if we're talking about usage of the internet, they're always on in your pocket, connected to the internet, and always downloading updates and syncing apps, whereas your Windows machine might be off for a lot of the day.
Yeah, I think that's tenuous. I mean, you could argue that, you know, when a computer is in use, it's on the internet, mostly like desktops these days. If you're still comparing like with like, a Windows machine would be on the internet mostly because most of the things people do are, you know, Facebook stuff.
That's true. Yes.
Yep. And of course, the population of Android users has exploded in Asia, which has obviously helped with this sort of swing.
That's where most of the growth is. I mean, Android is only actually more popular than Windows in Asia, but it's so much more popular in Asia that the world stats are now Android is ahead of Windows. Only just, but nonetheless.
Yeah. And 5 years ago, so at the moment, Android has 37.93% of internet usage. And 5 years ago, it had just 2.4%. So it's incredible, just the short space of time this has flipped around.
That's ridiculous. A report has been released by PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, and BAE Systems, which I learned of from our glorious sponsor, Bitfolk, their user list. Someone mentioned this report, and I'm partly mentioning it here just as a bookmark to myself to go and reread it thoroughly, because it's 25 pages of interesting stuff about some analysis they did detailing attacks on businesses by state actors in foreign countries, specifically a Chinese group, which they've called Apt10, who are attacking service providers. So people who do like Windows support and managed services, attacking them and then using them as a mechanism to get into companies and get their data and then bring the data out through the network that's been set up for the managed service provider to manage the internal network of these companies. And it's an interesting attack vector, and they've gone after lots of different companies in different industries. And it's a really interesting report, and a little bit alarming, but not altogether surprising in this, shall I say it? Okay, post-Snowden era.
There it is.
There it is. But I thought it was worth putting in there because it's worth a read.
Ooh. And finally, in the news this week, Mastodon is a federated open source Twitter clone, which is the new hotness in open source social networking. I particularly like this because the name Mastodon is named after the metal band Mastodon.
I only like it because it's one of those things where it suddenly got very, very popular, and it was very difficult to sign up, and the pages kept timing out. So that must mean it's worth signing up for.
Yes.
So I signed up.
But also because it's federated, there are lots of other instances that you can sign up for.
Oh, so I could sign up for one that actually let me log in then. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes,
I did precisely that. That's probably why you don't know that I follow you, because you're on like the primary server and I'm on like somewhere else.
So
it shows you. If someone follows you and they're on another instance of Mastodon, you still see that they're following you. The whole point of the Federation is that stuff does work.
I'm suggesting that Alan doesn't know because his node is down.
No, I've just opened it for the first time since a while, and yes, it says Martin Wimpress is now following me, and so is Laura Cowan. So that's super.
Awesome.
Oh, that's it. That's our social circle sorted. Then that's the new
my,
network.
My tech bubble is complete.
That's it. That's our Google Plus emergency replacement sorted right there.
Let us know if you're signed up to Mastodon or any other
and follow us,
social network-based
Ubuntu podcast
metal band. Yes. Oh, we on it.
Oh, is Ubuntu podcast on it? I shall follow you.
Yes. I signed us up.
Brilliant. That's the end of the silly news.
Now, here comes a roundup of community news and events.
Wow, it's enthusiastic when we get him on.
I know, I'm trying.
So first up, this is a personal one. Feel free to ignore it. I wrote the blog post and I put it in here, so suck it. Last Friday, we had a Snapcraft Docs Day, and this was just a little blog post I wrote. And partly the reason I put it in there is because I now have a blog again. I shut down my WordPress blog months ago, and I've switched over to Nicola, and now I use Nicola, and this was the first post I posted since I've moved to Nicola, so that's good. But yeah, read that. We had a little day where people came along and helped us improve the documentation for Snapcraft, and yeah, it was fun, and we got people filing bugs and people proposing merges and creating documentation, and it was super easy to do the bug fixes because it's all on GitHub and done. I made a bug fix using the Markdown editor directly in GitHub, and that was fantastic. It was really easy, and I was really chuffed with that.
Cool. Next up, Firefox news. Firefox is getting a redesign, and it now works with Netflix.
Woo!
So there's been some screenshots released of the new sort of redesign, retheming of Firefox called Photon, which is due to arrive in Firefox 57, although I haven't seen any screenshots for the Linux version yet.
That's a good point.
There aren't any screenshots for the Linux version yet, is why you haven't seen them.
Okay.
They've only released Windows and OS X screenshots.
Right. So, yes, it remains to be seen how similar or different the Linux version will be to how it is now and how it is on other platforms.
What like, in a tweet, how is it different?
Squarer, yeah.
Oh, okay. Great.
That's literally it. By the way, I was expecting some kind of radical redesign, and I looked at it and went, but what's different about that? I.e., not a lot. It's just a theme.
Right.
Yeah. There's
only so much you can do, really, with the Chrome around the box, because really the browser is the bit around the box. The thing you're really interested in is the stuff inside the box in the middle, not the stuff around the edge.
True, although you'd be surprised. Opera did a browser on the iPhone called Opera Coast, and it was quite a long way away from the standard. You've got a bar at the top with a URL in it, and then
they put it at the bottom.
No. You didn't have a URL bar on the screen at all, and you collapse things with gestures, and it was an interesting little kind of UI experiment. I think they did it. It didn't massively take off, but I like the fact that someone was doing something different. It was very oriented towards touch stuff. You couldn't have run it on a desktop, but nonetheless, people doing different things is a good idea. Photon, not particularly different.
No. Yeah, looks a bit bland. The more important news is that Firefox can now play Netflix. So most of the Linux distributions are providing Firefox as the default browser, and that now means that you don't need to use Firefox to go and get another browser in order to watch Netflix.
The thing which changed here was that Netflix themselves have decided to anoint Firefox, because it worked before as long as you lied about it, because they had the Google Widevine stuff, which the EME DRM stuff that Netflix required, but Netflix blocked it by user agent, and now they've stopped doing that, which is great.
Yes, indeed. In other browser news, Chromium is rolling out enhanced GTK 3 support. So what this means now is that Chromium will get all of its theming hints from the GTK 3 theme directly. And this is available as a preview in the current daily developer snapshots. And if you're using a GTK-based desktop, because they're the only ones I've tested, it does integrate really nicely now and actually looks like it's part of the desktop and not this, its own toolkit and its own thing.
Cool.
Which does actually help. That will be lovely. Yes.
Yeah, it looks significantly better, particularly like the menus. The one thing that still doesn't theme though is the scroll bar. That irks me no end. So the scroll bar still isn't themed, but maybe that will come. Because it's a preview at the moment.
And they also don't use native notifications, which is a source of constant annoyance to me, because then the notifications when I miss them don't show up in the little notification remember thing.
Exactly, yeah. And so on notifications, I don't know when this was introduced. When I looked, it seemed like quite a long time ago, but the Telegram desktop client can now do native notifications on Linux, which I've turned on. Yeah.
Yep, it can and it does.
Yeah,
Sweet.
It's great. Yeah,
which makes the experience worse on Unity.
It does
because you can't click on them and reply.
Oh,
I see. You replace Notify OSD with Mate Notification Daemon.
Boom! There it is.
There it is.
Thank you very much. Moving on.
The winners of the Ubuntu 17.04 Free Culture Showcase have been announced by Nathan Haynes. And the winning entries, what the Free Culture Showcase is, people put together examples of free culture. They do a sort of imagery or sounds and that kind of thing. And they end up being part of the upcoming Ubuntu release. So the 17.04 release.
Yes. Some of these are very pretty.
I know. It always impresses me when they do the Free Culture Showcase and when they do calls for background imagery and that sort of thing. People put together stuff and you think, wow, this is great. There are such talented artists out there.
Talented photographers as well. That's the real theme that you see now. It used to be that there used to be lots of abstract, images created in GIMP and Inkscape and what have you. And now you get this sort of selection of high quality digital photographs for the backdrops, and they are gorgeous.
Yes. Apparently the scene from the Road to Nowhere image, which is one of the ones that was selected, is also in Ubuntu Mate, it turns out. So am I allowed to say that?
You are. It's all bets are off now. We're allowed to say as much as we like. Yeah, I was surprised by this.
I didn't agree to that.
It's in my contract and everything.
Oh, okay.
I had a look through the screenshots earlier and I was like, that looks familiar. And it's the same scene. It's the same railway bridge and looking through the tunnel from a different angle. So I don't know if this is the same person who submitted images to both projects, but we have the same image in Ubuntu Mate, and the one thing he's done is there's some graffiti on the end of the railway bridge, the iron girders of the bridge, and he's gimped in the Ubuntu Mate logo in graffiti on that, which is kind of neat.
Cute. Up next, Mesa 1702 is now available in a PPA for Ubuntu 16.04 and 16.10, which the PPA tracks stable Mesa releases. And apparently this is a better place to get Mesa updates than the Xorg Edges PPA that we've previously mentioned and that lots of people throw around because it's got a newer version of Mesa. So if I've got an Intel laptop, if I install this PPA, I haven't yet because I'm a bit scared of doing anything graphical on this. Will I get like infinite frames per second in Crisis and
exactly
right?
If you've got a modern enough IGP, then yes, you will. So I've used this PPA on my Intel Skull Canyon NUC and my XPS 13. And the frame rates in games are up considerably from where they were before. So yes, this was following on from Mark talking about how much he saw the performance improve when he updated Mesa on the Entroware laptop recently.
So I guess the difference with Xorg Edges is I think that just builds straight from Git rather than using a stable version. Right.
And although this isn't an officially supported PPA, it is maintained by the guy who looks after Mesa in Ubuntu proper. So he has said, if you have problems, just mention you're using the PPA and we'll do what we can to fix it. So it's the most official, unofficial place to get Mesa.
And if it's a complete catastrophe and X doesn't start, you can just purge the PPA and revert back.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
Just so I understand this correctly, right? Imagine the most complicated game I play was Minesweeper, so I don't really care about it running in 10,000p or anything. Do I care about this Mesa stuff? Is it important for gamers and people doing intensive graphic stuff only?
You probably it's not just gaming because your browser may use the GPU for rendering, and things like scrolling smoothness and the speed at which it can draw the page is something that
and
you
desktop compositing possibly
care about. Yeah.
So it's OpenGL stuff basically.
Hence the question. Yes. So if I'm doing WebGL things or whatever, then this is also useful.
Yes.
The main reason that this came about, though, is some of the game publishers that publish the big titles on Steam were asking for an updated Mesa version for Ubuntu because it unlocked newer features, newer versions of OpenGL compatibility and improved performance so that their games ran better. So this was the origin of all of this, sort of going back to the back end of last year.
I'm going to give it a go. Yeah, I'm going to give it a go. We shall see. Moving on.
Snaps are now available for Ubuntu 14.04 LTS desktop and server. So this means that if a developer builds a snap package, that single package can target 2 LTS releases and the 2 interim releases, 16.10 and 17.04.
With one package. Brilliant.
Yeah. Just so, again, questions here. Does that, presumably that means that every existing snap now runs out of the box on 14.04, right?
That's the goal, yes.
Right.
We found a couple of rough edges and we filed bugs and those have been fixed as far as I'm aware. But yeah, that's the theory. You should be able to take any snap that you've already built on a 16.04 system and be able to, and anyone running 14.04 will be able to run the same snap. You don't have to rebuild for them. You don't have to recreate it for Trusty. It's the same code that can run on their system as yours.
So not only Snapd or whatever it is that provides the snap stuff is done, but all the interfaces and things that it talks to and everything also exist.
Yep.
Well, that's pretty cool.
And although we're talking about 14.04 here, the same is true for Debian 9, which is going to be released very soon. So you can install Snapd on Debian 9 and you can install the same snaps there as well.
And Elementary and Zorin and Gallium OS and
Linux Mint and countless others.
Yeah, it's cool.
Ooh.
And finally, Telegram voice calls are coming to the desktop Linux application for Telegram.
Ooh.
Yes.
That recently landed on the mobile app, so that's...
Has that arrived?
Yes.
It's on the mobile app, yes.
Wow, I didn't even know that had happened. When did that happen?
Like 2 days ago.
Oh, right, okay, fair enough.
I phoned Stuart with it.
Yes, on Saturday, and I think it had been released about 4 hours at that point.
How's the audio quality?
It was terrible.
It's not.
Oh,
it's
really?
not. It's quite droppy. Is that a word? There's probably an audio engineer's word for it, but we got a lot of dropouts.
It's all right, Stuart. You're among friends.
Yeah, and I hear you're famous for not being allowed to have an opinion about anything to do with audio as well.
Quite right.
So one to keep an eye on, but not quite ready for prime time yet.
No, to be honest with you. Although the emoji thing, what happens is, in order to verify that you're talking to the correct person and so on, you can read out like a secret key, a shared key. And for most things like this, you'd get some kind of long number or whatever to read. The Telegram thing just uses emoji, which is brilliant. So I'm like,
so you have to say smiley face, poo, man with his hand in the air.
yes,
sort of
man
thing.
running after a bus, smiley dog, that kind of thing.
It's brilliant. It's just so lovely. You just see 4 little emoji in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and all you got to do is just look at the screen, read them out to your friend, and then you verified that you're using the right key. And
to be honest with you, I mean, if you excuse me for going all maths and technical here for a second, if you wanted to say, okay, we need a number, make sure that you can't guess the number very easily. It couldn't be, say, a 4-digit number because there's only 10,000 of them.
Yeah.
So you'd need a 12-digit number or something. But there are loads of emoji. There are loads of Unicode characters. So there's so many more. If you just pick 4 random emoji, they're easy to describe. And you've got a much bigger key, but much shorter. Very clever idea.
Cool.
And we have some events, I believe.
We do have some events.
What's up first?
One of them is Guadec 2017. This is the GNOME conference. It's the 29th of July to the 2nd of August 2017 in Manchester in the United Kingdom. Guadec apparently brings together free software enthusiasts and professionals from all over the world, but it's essentially the GNOME user and developer conference.
Yeah, and the reason we've thrown this in is although it's a ways out, their call for papers closes on April the 23rd. So if this is an event you want to present at, then get your submissions in promptly.
Awesome.
Do you use Google Plus? I'm sorry. Feel less alone by giving our posts a +1. Then go to the pub and tell your friends about the Ubuntu podcast.
And that's all for episode 5, I hope.
I think so.
Oh, my browser's just crashed.
Well, we'll be back next week when we'll be reviewing the Dell XPS 13, the new Dell XPS 13, and we'll bring you some mystery love.
Ooh, mystery love.
Will you be around for next week, Stuart?
I reckon I can stick around for a week.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time. Ta-ta!
Bye.
Bye. Hang on, do I stop recording?